Greetings from Bulgaria, I'm Volk, and this is my shorter version of my Jedi Sentinel Watchman guide for patch 4.0 in Star Wars Knights of the Fallen Empire, the newest digital expansion released in October 2015. The guide is shortened because I've spent the whole day today prior to recording this video making up the written version of the guide, which contains a lot more information, and if you haven't checked it yet, well, I definitely recommend you do that. After recording the video, obviously this section here will not be empty anymore. This is the table of contents, and I will be following it and reading parts of the guide and describing other things that I haven't included into the guide to make the guide and the video complete each other. First, we are going to say a few introductory words and what the spec is good about, what some of the most important changes for patch 4.0 are. Then we will go to the section of stats priorities and gearing tips. The stat priorities will deal with accuracy, critical rating, alacrity, master and power. And also there's going to be a few tips and ideas and suggestions of how to gear up properly so you don't lose anything, meaning DPS, while you're gearing up. The next section of the video and the guide is about utilities and priorities. I will mention a few important passive abilities, active abilities. I will make a separate video talking about utilities in my guide, the written guide on my website. Link is down below to the left side, by the way, if you haven't seen the title yet. You will be able to see three kind of standard offers that I've made up for you guys. There are plenty of combinations available for the utility sections, and there is no way to list all of them depending on what you're doing, what you're facing, what your group setup is, and more things like that. I will share a few words about ability priorities, or as some people like to call it, rotation. I don't like that word, and thank God there is no strict rotation in Watchman discipline. I will tell you what one of the ideal openers is, and most of the time you should be able to perform it quite nicely, provided the boss is actually suitable for a Watchman spec playstyle. In the end, I'm going to share a few globalizations and a few conclusions, a few ending words, why I like the spec, why I did this guide, and what this guide was for. So, shall we begin? Say hello to Volk. He is ready to start displaying you all of the beautiful changes for the Watchman spec. This is how the inspect window for the Watchman discipline looks like. We have the most important active abilities listed here: Force Melt, Cauterize, Merciless Slash and Overload Saber. But let's begin with the intro. The Watchman discipline is the first of 3 available paths for the Jedi Sentinel class. It provides no burst damage at all, but excels at the single target and AoE sustained damage dealing. Due to the bigger number of abilities included and the mechanics of the spec, it isn't recommended, or at least I don't recommend it, for leveling and for newer players. It offers good survivability and almost full mobility, because of the fact that the only channeling ability is Blade Dance. Everything else can be used on the move, and some of the important abilities are actually ranged, meaning more than 4 meters range. What is the Watchman good for, or who is it suitable for, maybe? The playstyle is quite more complex than combat and even concentration, involves a relatively big number of abilities, has less than 0 burst in the opener. The spec is ideal for single target damage dealing. The longer you stay on the boss or the dummy, the better your results will be, provided you follow the priority of the abilities. The changes by the way made in patch 4.0 revived the spec, and it is not only useful but also much more entertaining to play now. The AoE potential hidden inside Watchman is incredible. Depending on the amount of mobs, their HP pools and the situation, players can spread dots very effectively. Cauterize only for quicker and easier pools, or both Cauterize and Force Melt for fights that would last maybe longer than a few seconds, like more than 10-15 seconds. Spreading dots became possible and very popular for AoE environment after 3.0, but it was seriously boosted and improved in 4.0 after the alterations were made to the cooldowns and durations of the dots. What I actually mean with this line is that Cauterize now has a 9-second duration, thank God. previous duration was incredibly annoyingly quick and short. Force melt has been completely redesigned. I will tell you more about that later, unless you read the description right now. But its duration is also 9 seconds, and when you do both of them and you use force sweep because of where the hell is it? Because of burning sweep, you will be able to spread your dots on all of the targets, up to 8 targets obviously, that burning sweep can reach. If the spec is played to the best of its abilities, it is on par with the highest parsing disciplines in the game currently. It doesn't have a specific rotation. Well, you could develop one, but it would only be viable for the ops dummy. My personal recommendation for leveling Sentinels is to avoid the Watchman spec. Its complete lack of burst makes the leveling process slower and more tedious. Not that you will have any real trouble leveling with it, just combat, my favorite for low levels, and concentration offer better tools for faster and smoother progress through the planets. If you really enjoy Watchman from the very beginning, there is nothing to stop you from using it for some tougher bosses and even trash pools. The self-heals provided with the spec and better long-term single target DPS may come in handy really. This was my overview of the spec. It is time to take a look and describe some of the most important changes that BioWare made. I will link you to my main video for class changes to both Marauder and Sentinel, because I've listed there all of the main changes regarding utilities and some of the main changes about active and passive abilities. If you don't want to watch the video, you can always read all of this in my written version of the guide. I want to mention a couple of things that I've discovered, and everybody else obviously, after the patch went live, because they were not included in the patch notes. Force Sleep now has a minimum range of 10 meters, did you know that? It used to be a filler and spammable ability. Now it has a minimum range of 10 to 30 meters. Force Melt now has a 15-second cooldown and 9-second duration for the dot. The ability is trained at level 10 now, over here. Force Melt now builds also 3 focus, which actually makes it effectively replace in the rotation Force Sleep. Cauterize now has a 9-second duration and it still has no cooldown, which means you can spam it as much as you want, but please don't do that, especially on a single target. It's a very cheap ability with very good dot. The fact that it's actually cheap makes it a good and ideal combination for easy and quick trash pulls combined with Force Sweep, because you can quickly spread the dot and do some massive damage. Stat priorities and gearing tips. The main damage comes from the dots, roughly about 30 to 35%. Yes, that's a little bit less compared to 2.x and 3.x. So 30-35% of the total damage dealt. Keeping them active, the dots, and all of the main damage comes from the dots, roughly about 30 to 35%, or maybe even more. Keeping them active is all that you need, and you want them active on as many targets as possible if it's an AoE situation, or at least on your main target. That's vital. It's also important not to overlap the dots, meaning don't use the next Cauterize, for example, before the previous one expires. The longer duration of the Force Melt allows it to be spammed because the cooldown is 15, as I've mentioned already, but the duration is only 9, so there is no way to overlap this one. You just have to be careful when the ability is out of cooldown and spam it. After the changes made to crit, now it is the single most important stat to stack like mad, and I really mean stack crit like crazy. Let's not forget accuracy, but it would be better if maybe we go all over this one by one. So, stat priorities. I have described the stats in the order of the priority you should give to them. Accuracy always comes first. Crit is the second most important stat now, and it should be stacked high. Alacrity is easier and a lot more affordable now due to the changes made to the 2 previously mentioned stats, and mastery and power are last in our builds in terms of priorities. What is accuracy? Accuracy is now easier to get due to the curve and the formula adjustments BioWare did for patch 4.0 and Knights of the Fallen Empire. The new target is now 110%. The basic abilities no longer have accuracy penalty, and both basic and special attacks require 110% now. The way to achieve this number is not set in stone. Using any gear that is available to you at any given time and moment of your gearing process, you should look for accuracy in implants, ears, augments, and anything else to balance the stats. The ideal number that you should be aiming for is 684. And let's not forget the companion bonus with this. Critical rating and super crit. Crit rating saw the biggest change in its formula and usefulness not only for this patch but overall since the release of the game. For almost all DPS classes it has become the most important stat to stack after reaching 110% accuracy. Crit now includes Surge, meaning there is no more a standalone stat called Surge. When stacking crit, you both increase your chance to land a critical hit as well as the magnitude of that critical hit. Crit is also valuable and important even for specs and abilities with auto crit because of the extra addition called super crit. When an ability procs for an auto crit, 100% chance to land a crit hit, a new formula comes into play that adds a portion of your critical chance on top of your surge, making the ability you're using hit even harder. I can't tell you the exact way this is calculated. I did read it on the forum, but I didn't remember the formula exactly. I have a link to that forum post on the written guide. The next is Surge. Surge should be about 69 to 70, maybe up to 71% with the Nightmare Gear 224. Keep in mind that both are dependent on crit, so you cannot manually boost one without the other. After this these percentages, the diminishing turn starts hitting the stat, and depending on what your playstyle and server lag is important for alacrity, you may decide to add one more item with crit or start building the alacrity just as I mentioned. Alacrity behaves exactly as it did before 4.0. It shortens the duration of channels, the duration of dots, the HOTS, the global cooldowns. With one word, it makes everything happen faster. For dummy parsing, alacrity is a vital stat and helps a lot due to Watchman being primarily used in boss encounters where the Sentinel is allowed to sit on the same target for longer durations. Alacrity is helpful here as well, and also the fact that crit starts hitting diminishing turn is another reason to begin building the next stat. The next stat in the priority is alacrity. Mastery and power, Mastery is a big change, but because it's actually just a name change, the same old stats for all four classes remain the same. They are just not called anymore strength, willpower, aim, and cunning. Everything is now called mastery, which actually simplifies, more or less at least for your casual ults, the gearing up process. For those ults that don't need set bonuses from your gear, that's what I mean. There is absolutely no change to the behavior of the stat. It still acts the same way it did in 3.0, and one thing important I want to mention is that Mastery benefits from all the datacrons now. There are no new datacrons, they're all the same ones, but they all benefit to Mastery now. The single reason I didn't lead with it is because, well, the name didn't change much, yeah? Just like the name with what was those glowing crystals, something, data crystals. Who cares? I still call them basic commendations, ultimate commendations, and elite commendations. The main difference between mastery and power, back on topic, is that mastery adds main bonus to damage but also a small bonus to crit, while power boosts only damage, but it does it a little better than mastery. So because we are not stacking mastery and power anymore, it doesn't really matter which one will go over which one. You don't really want to use augments with mastery and power now, remember that. If I must advise you, I would tell you to use crit augments, but the reality is different. You might end up needing a few accuracy augments, maybe even a couple of alacrity ones. It all depends on what items are available to you. Do not start building your character from the get-go following the mentioned thread on the forums, which is linked in my guide. Do not do that because you're going to hurt yourself very, very badly. You will see that I'm using a very, very strange mix at the moment. My gear is nowhere near complete, but the demand for my guide has been incredibly high, and I've decided to push things a little bit and do more predictions than testing, because I don't have access to the 224 gear yet. I haven't done a single nightmare, as a matter of fact. Yeah, it's time to admit it. It's been, what, 2.5 weeks after the release of the expansion, including early access, and I haven't done a single nightmare run yet to see what exactly has changed. In terms of relics, the recommended types of relics are the best available to you in the Serendipitous Assault and Focused Retribution titles. The reason for that is because the crit proc relic gives, if I remember correctly, about 2/3. Yeah, that's what I brought on my guide. It gives about 2/3 of the stats pool. So, for example, if you get 890 from this one, which is Revenite, yes, that's level 60. I haven't got access to the new ones. I wasn't lucky enough to loot any of them yet. The crit bonus here would be 2/3 of 890, which actually makes it, when you calculate things, I didn't calculate it myself, but I followed the suggestions on that forum thread. I mentioned it yet again, because it was really, really very useful. I think it was made by Goblin Lucky, and that person really did a lot of calculation and tests to prove the things that we were all thinking to be true, but most of us never tried. Warning in the end of the gearing process: do not replace your armoring mods with any new ones until you obtain the tokens containing the set bonuses. Set bonuses are important and very needed for best performance. Even if you have the old 192 set bonus, don't replace the armorings with the newer ones, which will remove your set bonus. And remember, the set bonus for the Sentinel is exactly the same for 192, 198, 216, 220, 224. Exact same bonuses on the exact same abilities. Nothing has changed. In terms of abilities, I would just briefly mention a few of the most important active abilities and why I consider them important here in the video version. For the rest, I would like to invite you again to check out the written version of the guide. So, our main dots are coming from Force Melt and Cauterize, as well as Overload Saber. The Overload Saber dot, as it says in the description, stacks up to 3 times. It is important to use these abilities pretty much on cooldown. Don't forget the Zealous Strike is the best and ideal focus builder. You don't use Force Leap anymore, but you use Force Melt instead, which has again 12 seconds cooldown and builds 3 focus. This patch is still only a sub 30%. Merciless Slash, don't pay attention, obviously these abilities are totally randomly spread here. You know that I don't use them in these locations. I usually stack everything here. If you want, actually check out my key binding guide if you're curious on how I bind things to my toolbars. Obviously now, after changing specs, everything goes random and I haven't bothered ordering them. That's why Merciless Slash is all the way over here. It is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, single target ability that doesn't have a dot. Maybe Merciless Slash combined with Blade Dance. Blade Dance is the new name for Master Strike. It hasn't changed. The ability does exactly the same as before. It cannot be interrupted. Yes, that's nice. It has been renamed because Strike, Master Strike, the Strike word in the title was confusing, according to BioWare, for newer players because of some of the passive bonuses within the discipline tree. But let's not go there. Twin Saber Throw has a proc and it has a relatively long cooldown of 80 seconds, which actually means that it should pretty much always be procced when it's ready and out of cooldown, so you should always use it as an ideal filler. Obviously, after 30%, you should find the spot to include Dispatch as another filler, but it doesn't get priority. The priority for the Sentinel Watchman spec all the time is Force Melt, Cauterize, and Overload Saber, while maintaining Merciless Slash on cooldown. Not because you're going to miss something. The Merciless buff now lasts for 30 seconds, so there is absolutely no way, unless you fall asleep during fight, to lose that buff. But the ability is really very powerful and you do want to spam it pretty much on cooldown. Another word I forgot to mention is about Zen and how well it plays with a combination of the 3 previously mentioned dots. The ideal moment to use the 30 stacks of centering and turn them into Zen. These are the 30 stacks of centering. Obviously I used Valorous Co. You can build them with damage, or you can use a utility point to have them pre-built before combat. But the main point is you should use Overload Saber, and after Overload Saber reaches 2 stacks on its dot, or the 3 stacks are already there, you should then activate the 30 stacks of Zen and centering, transferring them into Zen and boosting all of your nice dots, because that's what Zen does. If you read the description, Geoform increases the critical chance of your burn attacks by 100% and causes burn damage to heal your group for 1% of max health each tick. On top of the 15% self-heal, which, let's see, where was it? That's the one. Merciless Zeal is causing heal for 15% of the damage the dots you are doing. Let me read the description properly. Your Cauterize, Overload Saber and Force Melt, the 3 dots, burns heal you for 15% of the damage they deal. So that's a self-heal. If you want to heal the group, which you actually sometimes want to do, sometimes you do unintentionally, you use Zen. You use Zen to boost your own DPS. The extra group heals come as a bonus. And now we come to the utilities sections. I would like to open again my guide and show you what 3 versions of the utilities I have pre-built, because I'm gonna make another specifically dedicated to utilities section, and I will describe each one of them separately and tell you how I like them, when they are useful, and what do I do with them. These 3 combinations are by far not the only ones, and they are not basic. This one is good for this, that one is good for that, and so on. No, these are just 3 simple examples. You will notice that some of the utilities I keep using all the time, and these are the 3 primarily tier 1: Jedi Enforcer, Jedi Crusader and Stoic. It's because Jedi Crusader and Stoic go very well together, and Stoic is pretty much a want to have because of its description. Let me just very quickly and briefly go over it. Stoic increases your damage reduction by 2% and you build 2 centering when you are attacked. This centering building effect cannot occur more than once every global cooldown. The global cooldown in the game is 1.5 seconds. You can lower that with Alacrity, remember. So the first build, I'm focusing on AoE boost from Raining Slash. And actually I mistyped here because I obviously meant Trailblazer. Cyclone Slash deals 25% more damage. This is the one utility point that actually may be more useful for combat spec. Usually the utilities for pretty much most of the classes, or at least those that I play, they're beneficial and equally good for all of the 3 available specs, or at least the bunch of the utilities are good for all of the specs for the advanced class. However, Trailblazer is probably the one utility point available for the Sentinel that is really focused more towards combat than to the other 2 specs. That's just my personal opinion. The second combination is ideal for boss fights where Transcendence is useful for the whole team and mobility is a key. If I zoom in, you will see that the main change is Ardor and these 2 over there in the Heroic. If we switch back, we will see that Fleet-Footed is actually giving boost to Transcendence, and Expunging Camouflage is giving nice cleansable effect to the Force Camouflage. Ardor is a new, well, it was new a few months ago, utility that boosts Transcendence, and it no longer requires or consumes centering, but it will go on cooldown for 30 seconds. Transcendence is a very nice passive and usually it requires 30 centerings, but if you use that utility it will go on a static cooldown of 30 seconds every time you use it, and it gives you and your group within 40 meters movement speed increase by 50% and melee and range defense by 10%. That thing lasts 10 seconds. So if you use it every 30 seconds and it lasts 10 seconds, that's 1/3 of the time duration of the boss fight, boosted both defense and speed. And that's very useful for fights like, let's say, Torque, because everything in the Torque fight, Torque is the third boss in the Ravagers, just in case you don't know. Pretty much everything in this fight happens on 30-second window, or how should I describe it? Window sounds good to me. And it really makes a very good use for these transcendence moments. The third spec, the third combination, is universal build for mobility, survivability, single target damage, and a boost for the opener with an extra 30 centering ready before combat begins, suitable for shorter trash. What I mean by this is that in addition to Jedi Promulgator, which is one of my favorite heroic utilities, in this case I've suggested you guys to go for Contemplation. This is usually a PvP focused utility, but the fact that there are so many more better PvP utilities available now, I will not talk about PvP today, my apologies. I really don't know if Contemplation has the edge now. What it does is reduce the cooldown of awe, that's this ability, AoE CC. It reduces the cooldown by 15 seconds. In addition, you build up to 30 centering over the course of using Introspection. This effect cannot occur more than once every 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds you do Meditate, or as BioWare calls it, Introspection. You are actually building centering slowly up to 30. So you can actually start with 30 centering before the fight, then you have a free Valorous Call. This is ideal for a quick and kind of a pseudo bursty opener involving very quick inspiration in the beginning, attack adrenal, and Zen, all in the first few global cooldowns. This is pretty much, I will tell you right now about the utilities. Don't forget to check out the next video dedicated to them, and of course the guide on my website. In terms of ability priorities, I will only briefly mention how I've structured them. This is not a set in stone 100% priority system, but to me the most important is Force Melt, because it gives me a dot, it has a relatively short cooldown, and it builds focus. So after that follows Cauterize, Overload Saber, Merciless Slash, Blade Dance, Slash, Twin Saber Throw, Zealous Strike, and Strike. This is kind of a basic priority system, but remember, the Watchman spec in 4.0 allows pretty much all of the abilities to be used on cooldown. So depending on how you order them and depending on your target, as I've mentioned already, and you can probably follow the Ufalong's studies, and you will find at some point, if he hasn't done it already, that he is going to develop a steady rotation for the full duration of a 1 million damage points ops dummy. If you want to, you can do that, you can memorize it and do it perfectly, but the problem is this is never ever going to happen in a real boss fight, unless you're fighting, I don't know who, maybe Thrasher, the third boss in Scum and Villainy, and you're sitting down on the ground, not jumping up. Never mind, let's not stroll too much. My template for an opener involves the next ability. I'm gonna try to do them slowly, and unfortunately I will be mousing over so we can see the description, and since my abilities are in random order, I may actually have to do it slow. So the first thing you do is Force Leap and Overload Saber. Obviously Force Leap, I don't have a target, but I don't think I really need to go on a target whether I'm in combat mode or not. This isn't going to be a part, so I'm just mousing over the abilities. First we begin with Force Leap and Overload Saber, followed by the builder Zealous Strike. After that we quickly spam Merciless Slash and we begin with the dots. My first choice is Force Melt, and after that immediately follows a combination of Zen, Attack Adrenal, and Valorous Core. Remember, Attack Adrenal and Valorous Core, these are absolutely totally optional and they are not recommended for a beginning of a boss fight, but just for the purpose of dummy testing, because I know that many people will start asking what is the perfect opener for a dummy. That's why I've decided to share this one. After that we go with Inspiration, because we have 30 stacks from Valorous Call already, and then follows Cauterize again, Blade Dance, which remember takes 2 global cooldowns. Hopefully by then we will have a proc for Twin Saber Throw. If we don't, God knows what the hell is happening with the game. After that there should be already an Overload Saber available again out of cooldown. You could use a what the hell is this? A Slash for a filler, and as soon as it's ready again, Cauterize, Force Melt, Merciless Slash, and so on and so on. Just don't remember to do these things in a specific order. Try to remember the priorities or develop your own priorities. Test a little bit on this boss, on that boss, on the dummy. Decide which one is important to you. I can guarantee you that this is an awesome opener for a dummy test, but it is by all means not the only one, and it is not the ideal one for boss fights. Well, conclusion. Why should you choose Watchman over other specs? Let's read from the guide, because I'm tired of talking on my own. While lacking on the burst factor and high numbers per ability, Watchman excels in sustained damage dealing and offers great survivability with its self and group heals. It is not limiting the mobility of the user, allows for both single and AoE damage. Most of all, it is much more complex and entertaining spec compared to what it was in Shadow of Revan and 3.x SWTOR era. I seriously urge any and all who have played it before to give it one more try. It's a guarantee that you will like it, and some of you may even fall in love with it again or for the first time. There are bugs, yes, the utility bug is still present at the time of recording this video. There are a couple of minor bugs, or at least I think there are bugs, but I won't mention them now because I haven't gotten a confirmation from customer support specifically dedicated or specifically related, I should say, to the Watchman spec. The spec is very much on par with the rest of the disciplines, performs nicely in suitable boss encounters, and offers very decent challenge in mastering it. It's one thing to play a spec and a class, and it's a completely different level to master it. This guide is based on my personal experience with the Watchman from the first 2 weeks into 4.0, 2.5 weeks. Most of the tests were done with the old 198 set bonus and a balanced yet not perfect mix of mods spanning from 198 all the way to 220. I only have 2 or 3 actually, as a matter of fact 220s, but I already had the main hand. And if you want to understand how I got the main hand, you should check the guide. In the very end there is a link to how I obtained the main hand. It's a funny thing, and that's the very first time something like that has happened to me. This is it. The video went for far too long and I didn't structure it probably in the best way, but I really hope that you will find useful tips, tricks, suggestions and ideas within it. And if not, I would definitely urge you to check out the much more detailed and expanded written version of the same guide. It is all produced by me, and if you don't like something, the only person you should blame is me. Thank you guys for watching this crazy long video. It's even longer than the previous guide I made for patch 3.2.1. I will see you with the next one. Bye bye.